Before we get to today's episode, let me ask you, are you stuck on whether your story idea is book-worthy? Are you struggling to weave your scenes into one cohesive narrative? Or are you a serial starter who never quite makes it to the end? My free guide, Nail Your Story Idea, solves all three problems. You'll uncover your story's core in just 3 steps, create a rock-solid one-sentence premise, and get the confidence boost you need to finish what you start. Get yours free at nancypanuccio.com/idea. Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/idea. All right, let's get to today's episode. You don't have to fight your natural writing style. If you're a character writer, learn enough plot craft to give your character work structure. But don't try to write a plot-driven story if it's not your natural impulse. Don't try to become someone else. If you're a plot writer, learn enough character craft to make readers care, but don't apologize for your love of plot. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has the story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and book coach. Each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let's begin. What's the difference between a character-driven story and a plot-driven story? And how do you know which one your story falls under? Every good story is driven by both character and plot. It's just a matter of degree. I can't think of any good stories that are purely plot-driven or purely character-driven. So the question isn't which one, but rather what's the primary engine of your story and how do you balance both elements? In this episode, I'm going to break down what makes a story plot-driven versus character-driven, how to identify what kind of story you're naturally driven to write, and most importantly, show you how to strengthen whichever element needs more support. So let's start with character-driven. What does that mean? When we say a story is character-driven, we mean the primary source of narrative momentum comes from the protagonist's internal journey. The story moves forward because the character is changing, learning, struggling with internal conflicts, and making choices based on who they are becoming. Here's what character-driven does not mean. It does not mean there's no plot. It doesn't mean there's no action. It doesn't mean nothing happens externally. It doesn't mean the story is slow or boring or that it's purely internal. Character-driven stories ask, who is this person and how will they change? I think about The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. The external events, a butler taking a road trip, reflecting on his years of service, are relatively quiet. But the story is riveting because we're watching Stevens grapple with a lifetime of emotional repression, missed opportunities, and what it means to have lived a life in service to a morally compromised employer. The plot, what happens, serves the character's internal reckoning. I also think of Room by Emma Donoghue. Yes, there are dramatic external events. There's a kidnapping, captivity, there's an escape, but the story's real power comes from watching young Jack's understanding of the world expand and his mother's psychological journey through trauma. I also think of The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. There's a stolen painting and various threads around art forgery and crime. So there's a lot of action. But the novel's real concern is Theo's psychological journey through trauma, grief, and questions of identity and morality. In character-driven stories, if you removed the protagonist and replaced them with someone else, you'd have a completely different story. The character's specific psychology, desires, wounds, and growth are what the story is fundamentally about. Okay, so what does plot-driven mean? When we say a story is plot-driven, we mean the primary source of narrative momentum comes from external events, obstacles, and questions. The story moves forward because things are happening. Mysteries need solving, threats need confronting, goals need achieving. Here's what plot-driven does not mean. It doesn't mean the characters are shallow. It doesn't mean there's no emotional depth. It doesn't mean character development doesn't matter. Plot-driven stories ask, what will happen next? And how will the characters solve this problem? A great example of this is The Martian by Andy Weir. The protagonist, Mark, has a distinctive voice. He's funny, he's irreverent, he's determined, and yes, he grows through his ordeal on Mars where he's stranded. But the story's primary engine is the plot. How will he survive? Will NASA figure out he's alive? Can they rescue him? We're turning pages to find out what happens next, not primarily to see who Mark becomes. The character development is there, but it's relatively light in relation to the action. And that's perfectly fine because the plot momentum is so strong. In plot-driven stories, if you swapped in a different but similar protagonist, the major events and story structure would remain largely the same. The specific character adds voice and style, but the plot is the main event. And then we have the spectrum. It's not binary. Character-driven and plot-driven aren't two separate categories. They're two ends of a spectrum. Most successful stories live somewhere in the middle. On one end, you have strongly character-driven stories like The Remains of the Day or My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferranti, stories where external events exist almost entirely to illuminate character. On the other end, you have strongly plot-driven stories like The Da Vinci Code or classic adventure novels, stories that prioritize plot momentum over deep character psychology. The Martian is another example. But most novels fall somewhere in between. I think about Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. It's almost perfectly balanced. The mystery of Amy's disappearance and all those plot twists keep you turning pages. That's the plot-driven element. But the novel is equally interested in who Nick and Amy are, their toxic marriage, their alternating perspectives that give us deep access to two very different psychologies. So every plot twist reveals character. Every character revelation serves the plot. They're completely braided together. But here's what I want you to know. Quality exists everywhere on this spectrum. There are brilliant character-driven novels and brilliant plot-driven novels. The spectrum is simply a matter of narrative priorities. So how do you figure out where your own story falls? Here are 3 questions to ask yourself. Question 1, what are you more naturally drawn to or invested in? Imagine beta readers just finished your manuscript. What would rattle you more to hear? A, the plot was confusing and I didn't really care what happened next. Or B, I didn't really connect with the main character or care about her. If option A rattles you more, you're probably writing a plot-driven story. If option B sounds more rattling, you're leaning character-driven. Your gut reaction reveals what you're most invested in. Okay, question 2. Could you swap your protagonist? This is a thought experiment. If you kept all the plot events the same, but swapped your protagonist for a different character with similar skills, how much would the story change? If the story would be fundamentally different, if different choices would be made, different emotional reactions would emerge, you're probably writing a character-driven story. The character is the story. If the major plot events and structure would remain mostly the same, just with a different character, you're likely writing a plot-driven story. The plot is the story. And question 3, what question do you want your reader to carry through the story? Is it, what will happen next? Or how will they solve this? That's plot-driven. If it's who will they become or what will they learn about themselves, that's character-driven. Are both questions with approximately equal weight? Then you have a balance between plot and character. Okay, here are 2 problems I see most often and simple ways to address them. Problem 1, my plot-driven story feels shallow. The symptom is you have an exciting plot, but your readers say they don't connect emotionally with the characters. The quick fix is give your protagonist an emotional vulnerability that the plot events pressure. For example, in The Martian, Mark's external problem is survival, but his emotional vulnerability is isolation and the fear of dying alone. The plot forces him to confront his mortality and his deep need for human connection. You don't need to slow your plot, just add emotional stakes to your scenes. Okay, problem number 2. My character-driven story is boring. The symptom is you have rich, complex characters, but readers say nothing happens. It's too internal. The quick fix? Give your character a concrete external want that creates forward momentum. Even in The Remains of the Day, Stephen wants to make this road trip and potentially reconnect with Miss Kenton. That simple external goal gives the story structure. So you want to add escalating obstacles and deadline pressure. Even a subtle ticking clock, a decision that must be made by Friday, creates momentum in quiet stories. Okay, here's one simple exercise to strengthen your weaker element. If you're writing a plot-driven story and you're weaker on the character spectrum, or you're writing a character-driven story and you're weak on the plot, you want to do a scene integration check. So take 5 scenes from your manuscript, ideally from different points in the story, and ask for each scene. Number 1, does this scene advance the external plot? How? Number 2, does this scene deepen character? Number 3, does it do both or only one? Then tally up. You have scenes that do both. These are your strongest scenes, and scenes that do only one. These need some integration. For scenes doing only plot, add a character beat, a revelation, a relationship moment, an emotional reaction, or a decision that reveals internal conflict. For scenes that are only doing character work, add a plot beat, a clue, an obstacle, a choice with external consequences, or information that moves the story forward. The goal isn't every scene doing everything, but you should have more scenes that do both than scenes that only do one. Here's what I want you to take away from this. You don't have to be perfectly balanced. If your story is strongly character-driven, lean into that. If it's plot-driven, embrace it. Great books live everywhere on the spectrum. You don't have to fight your natural writing style. If you're a character writer, learn enough plot craft to give your character work structure. But don't try to write a plot-driven story if it's not your natural impulse. Don't try to become someone else. If you're a plot writer, learn enough character craft to make readers care, but don't apologize for your love of plot. Now, your first drafts can be imbalanced. Many writers discover in revision that they've leaned too hard in one direction. That's fine. That's what revision is for. So draft from your strength and revise for balance. The question isn't, am I writing a character-driven or plot-driven story? The question is, what does this story need, and how can I give it the right balance? Trust your instincts. Understand your natural inclinations and embrace that. And then make intentional choices. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And if you're listening on Apple, please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.